Good morning, everybody. Happy Wednesday to you. My name is Tim Harris. It's 10 o'clock. It's time for 10 with Tim. I love you guys so much. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I know some of you watch and never comment. You never check in. We have no idea that you're out there, but you're out there. And I love you. Thank you for letting me be a part of your Bible study. Those of you who interact with me every day, I love you guys. I love your comments. I don't always come in and comment, but know that I always look, I always read, and I always pray for you. I'm so very satisfied and happy that we can do this together every day. Verse by verse through the Word of God. We're in the book of Esther, almost done with Esther. Chapter 7 today. It is the big moment. This is the climax. It's amazing. It's Queen Esther's big banquet, second banquet with Haman and her husband, King Xerxes. It's interesting, I think, I noticed it more in chapter 7. It's kind of true throughout the book of Esther, but when Esther is, for example, in chapter 7, she's in her royal role. She is beside the king. She is in a banquet. She's in the palace. She's in her robes, and she is almost exclusively referred to as Queen Esther, or the queen. In the other, episodes of the story, primarily she is in dialogue with Mordecai, her uncle, and in all of those instances, she's just Esther. She's his ward, his adopted, what did we say, cousin, niece. And so, anyway, I just think it's interesting. In chapter 7, man, she is Queen Esther. She is royal. She is power, and she is awesome. So here we go. The king, Xerxes, and Haman go to Queen Esther's second banquet. On this occasion, once more they're drinking wine. The king's getting a little bit loose, and he says to Queen Esther, "Tell me what you want, Queen Esther. What is your request? I'll give it to you. Up to half the kingdom." Now I've said before that half the kingdom, even up to half the kingdom, that's the kind of thing a Persian king would say. In other words, it's more a royal formula that suggests his beneficence and generosity, although he may not truly be willing to give you half of anything. But in this case, he does seem to find great favor with beautiful Queen Esther, and he does seem to be willing to grant her most anything she would ask. What do you think he thinks she's going to ask for, though? That phrase, up to half the kingdom, obviously it suggests real estate, or wealth of some kind, material wealth. In one way or the other, he expects, I suppose, that she's asking for material wealth. Interestingly, that's not at all what she wants. There are certain things worth more than anything money can buy, and that will be human life. Human life is the most priceless thing of all. He has no idea what she's going to ask for. He's made this offer now several times. She keeps dragging out this moment, come to dinner, come to dinner. And here finally he says, "Tell me what it is. What is your request?" And she says once more, "If I have found favor with the king, and if it pleases the king to grant my request," she has said that before, "I ask that my life and the lives of my people will be spared. For my people have been sold to those who would kill, slaughter, and annihilate us. If we had merely been sold as slaves, I wouldn't even bring it up," she says. "That would be too trivial. It wouldn't even bother you if we were just being sold as slaves. But we're talking about total annihilation of a race of people." King Xerxes says, "Who would do such a thing?" The funny thing is, basically two people did it, and it's the two people at this dinner with Queen Esther. Xerxes has no idea. He is the most powerful dummy you'll ever meet. He doesn't know anything. He doesn't know anything. Haman, the funny thing is, Haman is present, but totally left out of this conversation. Don't you just know, man, this dude totally wet his pants when Esther starts talking, because he has to begin to see what's coming. But again, Haman barely has a speaking role. I don't know if he does actually have a speaking role at all in this dialogue. So she says, "This wicked Haman is our adversary and our enemy." The wicked Haman. I think it's interesting that in this moment, which is Esther's most obedient moment before Mordecai. Remember, it's Mordecai who prevailed upon her to do this, and she didn't want to do it for fear of her life. And Mordecai's the one that said, "Well, girl, you're going to die one way or the other. Maybe you could die trying to save your people." I mean, Mordecai, made that appeal to her. And so she is, in this moment, most obedient to Mordecai. At the same time, her obedience to Mordecai requires her breaking the first commandment he gave her, which was don't ever reveal your Jewishness. And that's a part of the story. So I just think it's interesting here that in the moment of obeying Mordecai, she also has to reveal her Jewishness, which is the one thing he said never do. But obviously, they both understood this is what would be required. You're going to have to reveal your Jewishness here, which is exactly what she does. But notice not yet. She just says, my people have been sold, and they're going to be annihilated. She doesn't come out and say who did it. And she doesn't come out and say it's the Jews. King Xerxes, of course, that indirection is brilliant. So King Xerxes says, who did it? She says, Haman, this man did it, our adversary and our enemy. Haman grows pale with fright before the king and the queen. And then the king, this is weird, I think, verse 7. The king jumps to his feet in rage, goes out into the palace garden. What's that about? The narrative doesn't explain that. Is he, this king of everything, is he incapable of controlling his own anger? Is that what we're supposed to assume? Is he, obviously he's angry. Does he begin to understand that he himself has passed this decree? I mean, I don't know what he knows yet. He just runs out into the garden in this rage. What seems clear to me is that, I don't know, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think Xerxes has made a decision on his own this whole time. And I think in this moment he could be just overwhelmed. He don't know what to do. He hasn't known how to scratch unless he asks his royal advisors. And at this point there's nobody here but Haman and the queen. And so anyway, Xerxes just runs out into the yard. I don't know what he's doing. However, it leaves this private moment between Haman and Queen Esther. Now, Queen Esther is reclining on her couch. Now, understand, this would be typical court etiquette for the queen in the palace. She's not just sitting on the couch, like she's, watching Jeopardy like you and I would. She is reclining because she is royalty and she's there to be served. And Haman would be there to serve her. She is reclining on the couch, but Haman goes nuts and he throws himself down in front of her and begs for his life. Now, this, I think, is highest irony. Remember that the whole story begins because there's this Jew named Mordecai who would not bow down before Haman. And now at the climax, you have Haman bowing down before the Jew Esther. I just think that's awesome. So he throws himself down. The language isn't clear. I don't really think he throws himself down on top of her body. I don't know if he throws himself across the couch. I don't know, but it doesn't matter. In Persian harem court etiquette, in other words, what you gonna do when you're around the king's wives? I think it was 7 paces. You're not allowed to get within 7 paces. So you can't approach, you certainly can't touch, but you can't get close enough even to reach out and touch the king's wife. And so again, 7 paces would be what would be protocol. The fact that he is somehow thrown down near her, perhaps touching her, maybe on her, we don't know. And that's enough. And so for that matter, the king comes back in and says, man, would you assault my queen right before, my very eyes here in my own palace? And as soon as the king spoke, the attendants, they came, they covered Haman's face. I believe that was typical Assyrian, I think Persian too, but typically Assyrian custom that a person about to be executed is going to have a bag over their head. So they cover his face, signaling that Haman is about to be executed. He has assaulted one of the queen's wives, so to speak. And so for that reason, that's considered, an insurrection. Remember in all the stories about David, when Absalom, takes the king's wives, for himself, that in itself is a move for the throne. You're taking what belongs to the king, which means the throne's next. And so Haman's indiscretion, or in this case, a terrible mistake before Queen Esther seals his doom. Some people have raised the question, why doesn't Esther, honestly, he wasn't trying to get after her. He was just begging, but Esther doesn't say anything. She probably, again, court etiquette. You can't argue with the king. Number one, the king has spoken, and once the king speaks, I mean, that's the king's word. You don't argue with the king. Also, others just say, well, he didn't assault her in the way the king thinks he assaulted her, but he also did, arrange to have an edict signed that would kill her and all of her people. So you can't also say that he didn't assault her. He kind of did. So at any rate, Harbona, one of the king's eunuchs, says, hey, well, wait just a minute. Haman's got this 8-story pole, sharpened out in his yard. I saw it with my own eyes. He was going to impale Mordecai with it. He's the same guy that saved you from assassination. It's interesting that Harbona has this important, speaking role here, because this is an amazing introduction of unknown but welcome information. Nobody knows this but Harbona. But remember, the eunuchs went to Mordecai's house, Haman's house, to bring him to the banquet. And so they saw this, and like I said, everybody in the whole kingdom knows how much Haman hates Mordecai. Everybody seems to know this except the king. But anyway, Harbona saw the pole, and now he just chooses this moment to say, by the way, if you're looking for a good way to kill this man, he's got a pole in his own front yard. And so the king orders, all right, hang him on it, impale him on it. So they impaled Haman on the pole he set up for Mordecai, and the king's anger subsided. Again, I don't want to rejoice over a man's death, even a man like Haman that we all hate. Nobody likes Haman. But my goodness, everything that he planned for Mordecai, everything that he planned for others out of his own hate, it comes back on himself. Be not deceived, God is not mocked. Whatsoever a man soweth, that shall he also reap. So it's the Bible's way of saying, man, it's always going to come back to you. So be careful what you plan. For somebody else, it's going to come back on your head. And that's what happens to Haman. That's the end of Haman. But it's not the end of the story. Haman is now dispatched, but we still have this terrible edict that supposedly is irreversible. The king has said that all the Jews must die on March the 7th. So we've yet to see how the rest of this story resolves. That's where we'll pick up, of course, tomorrow. Esther chapter 8, verses 1 to 17. Esther chapter 8, verses 1 to 17. Just so you know in advance, I do believe that the longest verse in the whole Bible is in Esther chapter 8. So I say, see if you can find it. I'm pretty sure you'll find it. But pay attention to Esther chapter 8. Literally the longest verse in the Bible is in this chapter you're reading for tomorrow. So I'll see you in the morning, Lord willing, 10 o'clock for 10 with